my MacBook always had a super drive problem, and you could bring things in. I do most of my own fixing, but no, there is no voiding of warranty. As a matter of fact, in the manuals, most Macs, they show you how to take the RAM out, video cards, where the slots are, especially on the Pro system.
No, that is one of the nice things on the Pro system, and there are so few OEMs who build those Pro systems who bother to make opening them up and easily messing with them addressable. Mm-hmm. HP is one of the ones that has started doing that, but most of them...
It's nice. Yeah, they sure do.
Yeah, but most of them don't. And as if you've ever built your own system, you're like, okay, why didn't you use the case that has this turned 90 degrees so it's accessible and right here? Why didn't you use the shrink wrap cables? Why didn't you start bitching at them for cheaping out on little things that cost like 5 cents in an OEM level? That's like...
Well, I want to get back to the price point. The thing that I've always seen is that I declare usually, and I made videos where I stated that Macs are overpackaged. In other words, for instance, a Mac Mini, you get Toslink out, automatic, and you have all these extra peripherals that you cannot downgrade from to change the price lower. And therefore, you can't escape that. And so when you add a lot of these things in there, which a lot of people could care less about and have really no business even having some of those peripherals, can't escape that cost. And therefore, you're buying something you don't need.
I would disagree. Well, actually, on the new Mac Mini, it's not an issue because they added an HDMI port. But before they added an HDMI port, I would have argued you needed that, if only so you could have the DVI to HDMI and other things like that. And the real problem I never did understand why they made this change, because the old initial Mac Minis had standard DVI, and then they changed that to the mini form factor.
Yes.
And I'm like, why did they make that change on the Mac Mini? It's one of those things, because the Mac Mini, it doesn't come with the monitor. It's like, it makes sense on the iMac because the iMac has a monitor.
They do give you an adapter. They do give you an adapter.
They give you the adapter, but like you're saying, then that adds extra cost. It would have been cheaper for the end user and for Apple if they just stuck with the right connector on the motherboard.
Well, I don't know all the logistics of, if they choose a certain port format. Is it because they get a great bulk price on that? I don't know, or if they're trying to save room, this and that. It's kind of like on the iPhone 4, they're going to micro SIM because they can cut out a good amount of space, which is really just plastic anyway, and use some more of that real estate when it really counts. And the Mac Mini is a form factor intensive unit where you do want to save space. But how much space are you saving going from the DVI to Mini? I don't know. And I couldn't say if they got a great deal on a bulk order using that specific onboard port. But what I'm getting at is it's not as much today. But when they switched to Intel's, and I would say up to like 2008 and early 2009, before other OEMs really just started handing out digital out on everything. And we're talking about OEMs because build your own, every OEM loses to building your own, unless you're an E-machine, which is just going to be crap anyway.
Yeah.
Everybody loses to build your own. So I try to stay out of, telling a customer, just build your own, go get this case, here's an Intech case, and here's a hard drive, and here's a RAM. I don't want to hear that. So I got to really stick into the world of, here's a Dell and here's an HP. Is the Dell, how much more is the Dell going to charge you to get Toslink out? How much more is the Dell going to charge you to have digital out? These things, how much is it for a built-in webcam and mic and all this other stuff? And sure, you can build a system on Dells that I've seen that are still cheaper than a Mac. I'll admit to that. But I will tell you that the all-in-ones.
The all-in-ones is one way in which I like. If you'll notice, there are certain Apple machines I've never really bashed on. I don't bash on the iMac because why I think it's too expensive for what it is. every all-in-one system is too expensive for what it is. And actually, the iMac is the least too expensive for what it is. So that's something Apple actually did right there. If you'll notice, I only bash. I've never bashed on a Mac Air. I always talk about laptops should have removable batteries.
Yes,
On a small form factor like the Air, it makes sense. It makes sense on an ultralight machine like that because integrating it like that lets you do other stuff. I would even argue there's an argument for doing it on the MacBook because that is not intended to be a pro user machine. On the Mac Pro, with me, it's inexcusable because I don't care if it gets 10 hours. That's not enough to get through a full, I'm pulling an all-nighter workday, mobile, running around everywhere else. And people doing pro work, whether they're doing video editing, whatever, do that type of stuff. So on that system, it's the same. The same thing on the iPods. My big problem with the iPods is and the iTouch is they're dependent on iTunes. Not so much that they're internal form factor systems. On the phone, of course, there's obvious reasons they should have a removable battery. It's like there's some things Apple does do good. Some of them some of them it's just a lot of it they overcharge for. It's like we're saying on the price.
I've heard a lot of people complaining about the prices of the notebooks. Definitely. I mean, there's not a whole lot to compare for Apple desktops, but yeah, they are. And surprisingly, their largest amount of sales from Macs come from the notebooks. The MacBook Pro.
Yeah.
I think only 18% of their revenue comes from the actual desktop.
And I think that's why they don't put as much energy into them. I would be willing to bet that the three best-selling systems for Apple are the MacBook Pro, the MacBook, and then the iMac. I don't know if the iMac's above the MacBook or not, but I'd be willing to bet that's their three systems. They don't really care about the rest.
Right. Yeah. So.
Okay. Well, there's other stuff to go into, but we're coming up on 2.5 hours, so I think we should put the rest off to next week, unless you really want to keep going. Okay. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this up here and forgive the few spots where I wasn't keeping my eye on the clock, people. Yeah, peace out all.